Welcome to this class, the market research data collecting process. This class is the conceptual continuation of the previous one, where we dealt with general considerations and some preliminary indications about market research. This class is also the fourth stage of the market and marketing analysis within the investment process assessment. The outline is very rich, as we might say. We will start with data collection process, an overview. We will deal with the types of data. We will deepen the analysis of the survey process. We will consider sampling and questionnaires as methodological aspects and specific instruments of data collection. And at the end of this class, we will deal with the test marketing, which is a very powerful tool related to the launch of new products, for example. So this is going to be quite a technical class. We will deal with a lot of items and definitions. We will see a lot of lists of items. So let's consider this class as the recipe for collecting data in a market research initiative. Data collection, the overview. Let's start with the consideration that information can be obtained from primary, secondary, tertiary sources, as well as non-traditional sources. So this classification in terms of sources, as we will see, will lead to the classification of information itself. So we will define primary, secondary, tertiary, and non-traditional information in data related to the sources that we can or we choose to refer to. In a more specific way, primary data are related to primary sources, secondary data are related to secondary sources, meaning that either we refer to, as we will see, the so-called gray sources or other elaboration of primary data. With the same mechanism, we might obtain tertiary data, and we might refer to the non-conventional data or the informal methods when we're able to gather information and obtain data through non-structured ways. I mean, referring to non-scheduled activities, non-structured questionnaires, non-organized specific service, and things like that. Data is coherent information. Coherent information means that it could be a single source of information that we take in consideration, or we could elaborate more single information and we might obtain data. The coherence of data is related to the domain. So data is coherent information and it pertains to specific items like the industry we're operating in or we're about to operate in, the enterprise, considering the hosting organization of the investment projects we're dealing with in this program, and the external environment. So again, the coherence of such information is evaluated according to the target we're going to analyze. So we might have data about the industry, about the enterprise, about the external environment. The cost of acquisition of data is also very important. So we need this coherent information, but information is costly. We have to activate sources. We have to buy databases. We have to organize activities. We have to have workforces dedicated to this data collection and analysis. So, the obtainment of data has a cost. This cost should be compared with the value of information. So, in dealing with the necessary amount of data that should be collected or should be set up in order to establish decision processes, companies should go through a cost-benefit analysis, as in many other activities. Uses of data can be heterogeneous as well. So once the database is established, once data is gathered and structured and organized, we might have immediate usage of the data or future utilization of the very same data set. So in terms of this overview and general considerations, we must face the fact that data is coherent information and as an asset, as a whatever enterprise-related asset, has got its own specific costs and benefits. Types of data. Data may be classified according to the sources of our information. So let's start with the classifications that we dealt with already between primary, secondary, tertiary, and information gathered through informal methods or non-structured sources. When it comes to primary data might be obtained by surveys and tests. So we have surveys when, in general terms, we have an individual or a group of people collecting information from a population. And as we will see, if the whole population cannot be reached, surveys are about a sample that might be extracted from the population. On the other hand, tests are closely related to what is called the laboratory experiences or experiments in the natural sciences. So it's a collection of inputs and outputs out of reactions when some individuals or some other entities are exposed to some stimuli. So primary sources basically mean that we have a primary and direct access to the sources of data. In terms of specific mechanisms, we might have informal data collection. So through the conversation with other people, we might be able to detect some information and to elaborate some information into some data. We might have structured surveys, again, when we target a population and we sample this population in segments and we try to analyze it through specific methods, as we will see momentarily. Test marketing, this is going to be the last part of this presentation, which is particularly important when we're trying to figure out what the market reaction could be to the launch of a new initiative or to the launch of a new product, for example. And then we have experiments. As I was telling you, the idea of experiments is very close to the natural sciences field. So it's a collection of reactions to specific stimuli that we're exposing a group of individuals or whatever organizational entities to. So these are the collection mechanisms for primary data. In terms of cost and value, two items that we have just dealt with. Primary data collection through the employment of such mechanisms is the most expensive, but in general terms must be the most valuable source of data for the organization. it's a direct contact with the sources of information. So if we consider the market as a source of information, it means to have a direct access to the data and the information expressed by our potential customers. Secondary data could be classified according to the sources and the aggregation criteria that we put into place. So when it comes to sources, secondary data might be obtained by published and unpublished materials. By the wording, if something is published, is made public for the general audience. If we have access to reserved or classified materials, of course we're referring to unpublished documents. Another distinction between published and unpublished materials could be related to the accountability and to the reliability of such sources. So if something is published, as we'll see, by governmental agencies or global agencies, probably the degree of accountability could be higher from a gray material which is unpublished and where the sources and the data methodology is not that clear. Another source of secondary data might be magazines, journal, reports, and so on. Trade statistics is the one elaborated by the World Trade Organization, for example, are important sources of secondary data. So all these global organizations like WTO, GATT, and so on elaborate some information through the utilization of extended data sets. These data sets are usually available to the public. So it's not uncommon in market research, as in the rest of social research, to refer to such data sets for further elaboration. Then we might have census data. So if we target a specific area and the regulatory agency, like the government, is collecting census data, census itself could be a useful source of information. One negative aspect, which is often related to census data, is the degree of the update degree of such data, which means that census take place generally each 5, 10, or 15 years. So we might have a picture of a specific situation, which is not just the state of art of the local conditions. Trade organizations are very active in gathering data and setting up data sets and databases, which are often available, as well as they are very committed to the delivery of specific recent trends or documents related to the general trends for international trades. These are very precious sources of information too. International development organizations. So everything which is related to the international development, like the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, for example, delivers and produces documentations and educational programs which are precious sources of information about the local markets as well. So, as we've seen so far, primary data imply direct access to the sources, whereas secondary data is related to the utilization of already published or already elaborated materials from third parties. Tertiary data are made of analysis of data and analysis of scenarios. So the analysis of data is the elaboration of data which are obtained by a third party through a new innovative model or through a new innovative algorithm, for example. When it comes to scenarios, a scenario is the elaboration of different alternatives, and these different alternatives for the focal organizations could be obtained by combining different sources of information. So if we combine different secondary sources and or some secondary sources and primary data, we might have a scenario which is a combination of the two items, which in terms of information science could be defined as tertiary data. So in general terms, a desk study is a practice which is related to researching secondary and tertiary information through spurious information flow and useful contexts. So desk analysis and desk study are made of a combination or are made of several combinations of all these sources of data, combining both official and unofficial documents, combining both data sets that we might be accessible for our organization and useful contents as well. What is the disadvantage of such an alternative? Well, when it comes to researching secondary and tertiary information, we have a few caveats. The first one is about biases. So from a statistical point of view, a bias is a systematic influence of the obtainable information connected to some objective and subjective elements that characterize the data set we have obtained. So just to be a little bit more practical, if we refer to a specific data set and or if this data set is very specifically related to a specific region or segment or product, it's very difficult to generalize the conclusion we might reach through the elaboration of such data or information, since the specificity of the initial data set. So the bias is a condition which could influence the general abstraction of our conclusion. So through the informal context, for example, we might extract biased conclusions which are affected by the personal evaluation of the informal context we have involved in the analysis. A second caveat is related to motivated responses. So, for example, if we interview people, it's very difficult to distinguish between the objective idea they have in mind and the subjective perception of the subject of the interview itself. So, if we consider the study, the desk study or the desk analysis, the idea of motivated responses could influence the accountability and the reliability of the final data set and the final information we're going to gather. Distortions could occur when we have different sources of data obtained in different ways, and when we combine them all together in the same model, we might have distortions related to the different level of specifications of the data, or, for example, if the data sets or the sub-data sets are not consistent in a temporal way, we might have data which are referred to different time periods. So the final data set or the final information that we gather could be distorted by the heterogeneity of such different sources. Once we have clarified what we can do with the data and what types of data we are dealing with, we could deepen a bit more the idea of survey process. So we might explore what to do once we have decided what kind of data we're aiming to collect, and once we have decided what to do with the data we have collected. So this survey process implies a specific sequence of these 4 stages that we have depicted here. So the first one is about design. If the process is not designed in a proper way, it's very difficult that we're gonna have at the end reliable and accountable data. So design is about what to look for, what are the aims of the survey itself. It's about methodology. It's about time scheduling of activities. It's about resources to be involved in the survey itself. The second element is related to the use of the instrument. So the questionnaire is just one of the possible instruments that we might use in a survey. It's the most diffused one, it's the most referred one, and it's a flexible instrument since it could be structured in a way which is totally respondent to the exigencies of the survey itself. Then we have the execution, which is just the organization of the design. So it's the bunch of actual actions related to the scheduled ones. And then we have the data analysis, which is the 4th stage, which means that once the data are gathered through these 3 phases, then we could analyze them and extract the information that we're looking for. So, just to be a little bit more specific about the process design, we have the objectives, we have the information needs, we have the expected population and geographical coverage. This phase is very important because a population is just the consideration of the whole elements we have in the market, for example. So if we're targeting a specific market, the population itself is made by all the individuals representing, in terms of consumer behaviors, that market. If population is spread in a geographic way, the geographical coverage is very important as well to consider. So if we have an heterogeneous distribution of resources, habits, values in a geographic area, if we consider only some specific areas like big cities, the analysis itself could be biased by the consideration of such cities and the exclusion of the rest of the country. So the geographical coverage is very important both for the significance of the analysis and for the research design, because the exigency of reaching different areas could enhance the survey costs as well. And we started from the consideration that when it comes to information and data, we should compare costs and benefits. Technically speaking, the design involves also the sampling plan. So the idea is that since it's very difficult that we could consider the whole population and or the whole geographic coverage of the survey, we need a sampling plan in order to extract some samples from the whole population, and through the analysis of such samples we might be able to define some characteristics about the whole population. So design is the first step. Second step is the development of the questionnaire. So instrument, questionnaire, we should develop it. We should proceed through some trials in order to give the questionnaire the final structure. So we could start from a pilot questionnaire, refine the pilot questionnaire, and then deliver the final, the ultimate questionnaire we're going to use for the general investigation. And then we have the administration methods that might differ from the one kind of questionnaire, let's say a very structured questionnaire, or a semi-structured questionnaires. The third step is the execution. So, in actual terms, it's the field work, it's the information gathering. So, we have different methods we could refer to for the execution phase. We could have web-based questionnaires for web-based surveys, which are very easy to spread, but missing the one-to-one contact, the information gathered could be poor, and or degree of response to the questionnaire could be poor. On the other hand, we might have face-to-face interviews based on a questionnaire. So the interviewer in such a situation could be pretty sure that the interviewed person is aware about the meaning of the answers. It's totally confident about the meaning of the questions and the significance of the answers as well. A middle solution could be based on the interviews or surveys conducted through the phone, when we have a virtual media connecting to two or more physical individuals. So field work, information gathering. Then we have the screening phase. The screening phase is very important in order to establish what data we have collected could be included in the dataset we are creating, or what kind of data could be considered insufficiently reported or incomplete, so they should be excluded from the dataset. Data analysis is the last stage of our process. So it's about tabulation and analysis itself. When it comes to tabulation, it's just it's definition of the structure that we're going to give to our data set. And so we schedule and we put into place some tables for this tabulation. And when it comes to the analysis, we could refer to different methods for investigating the same data sets. So if we're trying to induce some, or we're trying to understand some general evidence from a sample of information we have gathered, we could refer to different statistical, econometrical, or mathematical methods in order to extract the evidence from we have gathered. Sampling and questionnaires, in technical terms, are very important to be planned too. So, when it comes to sampling, the sample could be created through different variables. So, if we are able to reach the whole population, we don't need any sampling methods. If we have to narrow our scope, then we need a sampling methods. So, understanding and studying the characteristics of the populations in terms of age, income per capita, tastes, habits of consumption, and so on, we might be able to extract from the population itself the variables which are the most significant variables related to the population that should be used for the sampling activities. When it comes to the elements, it's about the specific characteristics of the sample that we have in mind for our survey. So we structure the idea of the sample and we define it through the two different elements. The units of the sample. So if you consider the population, we might have individuals, but we might have households as well. The reach of the sample is very important. So if we consider the geographical distribution of the population, for example, we might state that our samples might represent a specific percentage in terms of reach or extension of the analysis compared to the population as a whole. And time. Sampling is time variant. So the more specific the variables are, the higher is the time to conduct the analysis. So in terms of cost-benefit effect, we might have different elements of these sampling alternatives related to time as well, the execution time of the survey. When it comes to methods, once we have fixed the variables, we have different sampling methods. The first one is the simple random sampling, which means that the individuals or the specific items are randomly extracted and picked from a population. So if you have a general population and we think that the information is randomly dispersed in the population itself, we can just randomly pick individuals from the population. On the contrary, if we consider that the population itself is stratified in different areas or different levels, let's consider, for example, the age as sampling variable. If we consider different levels of age, we might have different stratifications within the same population. So in such a case, we might refer to the stratified random sampling, whereas we fix different classes, the stratifications, and we pick the same number of individuals from each class in order to have more representative view of the whole population. Then we might have the area sampling. Let's recall the geographic distribution of the eventual population. And we might have the non-probability sampling. When it comes to non-probability sampling, it means that we refuse the idea of random sampling and we try to justify the sampling through different criteria. So one criteria is the convenience sampling. So I just take in consideration elements which are convenient to be included from a cost perspective, for example, from a reachability perspective. We have judgment sampling when we have different judgments or ideas about different elements of the same populations. And then we have the so-called quota sampling when we try to interact with the individual, or we better try to detect the different relations between different elements of the same population. So these are the technical elements of a sampling analysis, and accordingly the way we structure the samples as an input on the questionnaires as well. The last part of this class is about test marketing. When it comes to test marketing, it's very important to define two aspects: when and why. And then we'll see that we have specific approaches and specific items related to test marketing as well. So we need to test the market in a kind of experimental way when we launch new products, when the existing products are introduced into new market segments. So we have the established products, but we're trying to explore new segments of the same market. Or when historical data are not available or accountable. Why? We need to understand the consumer response. So we kind of try to predict the future behavior of customers, and we increase the validity of response. So we already have some evidence, but we want to increase its validity. So what is the approach to test marketing? We have basically two approaches: the simple approach and the complex approach. The first one is about to provide sample, to demonstrate, and to explain. And then we seek responses. So, for example, if we have a new product in mind, or we have to revitalize or rehabilitate an existing product, or we are investing in the penetration of a new segment or a new market, we provide our potential customers a sample of the product. We demonstrate them how to use the product, or we let them taste and utilize the product itself, and then we explain what the new characteristics of the products are. So if we consider food or goods related to the personal care, we expose our existing and potential consumers to the experience of the product itself. And we collect information. As you can see, this is a primary source of data. We have direct access to the potential consumers, and we gather information. Of course, if the sample of the population we're taking in consideration is biased by one of the elements that we've seen, the analysis itself could be biased. So if we just expose the new generation or the teenagers to the product, and we're meant to sell this product to the adults as well, if we just concentrate with the test marketing in one area of the population, then the general conclusions we could lead to could be biased. So again, the access to primary data does not solve the problem of having biased evidences. Some of these problems could be solved by the complex approach. The complex approach is based on the idea that we should select test markets. So it's not just the general markets, but segments of the same market, for example. We launch promotional campaign to reach these markets, and then we launch a product. And then after we have launched the product, we could conduct specific surveys on those target markets. So market research ends with these specifications about technical, methodological, and statistical consideration about data collection and analysis. You can refer to our website for further information. Thank you.